is Kelly Carnahan from Ask Resource Center, and I will be facilitating this webinar along with a few of my colleagues, Susie Lund and Mari Brown. We are the training coordinators and data coordinators here at Ask. We thank you for joining us today for the webinar titled Post-Secondary Transition in an IEP. The presenter today is Pam Woelber. She is our Post-Secondary Transition Coordinator here at Ask. Before we begin, I'd like to share a little bit more about Ask. Ask Resource Center is a family-focused nonprofit organization whose mission is to empower people with disabilities, their family members, and the professionals who support them.
All right. So thank you everyone for coming and receiving this information. I'm really excited for this opportunity to kind of go through the IEP and what I know about the transition components. To start out, just a little bit about myself. Personally, I am a mother to 5. I have biological kiddos, I have adopted kiddos, and I have foster kids. And I would say that all of them have had different difficulties throughout their school years. And so I have been through the whole process from early access to adulthood in some kind of way. So my oldest, Zachary, is 31. He lives in Sioux Falls. He struggled through school and didn't really want to go on to college. As a young adult, he found someone, an agency or a construction place that gave him hands-on and learn as you go type opportunities. So he works for Mirth Electronics in Sioux Falls. My daughter, Toria, she received early access services and currently receives adult services. And it's kind of an ongoing process with her. She's 27. Lexi is my senior in high school, and so we're in the trenches of transition planning right now. She would qualify for extend for 4+ services, but she doesn't want to do that, and so we're figuring out a different plan for her. Evie is a sophomore in high school, and she has a diagnosis of autism, and so we're just in the very beginning stages of having conversations around what it is that she would like to do as an adult. And then Charlie is 15, and she is a freshman in high school. So we really haven't started the transition plan for her. She's had her first transition IEP last year, but you know, it develops as she grows. It will develop as she grows up into school. And professionally, I have a master's degree in vocational rehabilitation, and I spent 22 years as a transition coach and family and educator coordinator at Northwest AEA. So I've had opportunities to work with both families, students, and educators around this topic of post-secondary transition. So I would just like to suggest that if you have it, that you refer to your child's IEP as I speak. In training in other places, being able to kind of compare the two can really, I think, aid in learning. I also have attached a sample IEP that you can follow as well. And so as you kind of get settled in and get to that, either of those documents, if you could put in the chat, so I get an idea of all who's here. Are you an educator, parent, student, or service provider? So to begin, it starts with transition assessment. And I think you'll hear me say that quite often through this presentation, beginning at the fourth or at the year that the student turns 14. There's going to be a change in how the IEP looks, and we'll be looking at that change as we go. But one of the first changes that you're going to see is that assessments are an important piece of the transition process. It happens each year. So it's not a kind of one and done at the eighth grade year. Every single year for that IEP is going to start with transition assessments. And assessments can also determine what skills the youth already has and if there are gaps in skills that need to be developed in order to prepare for their next steps. So I'm going to pull up the IEP that I created for this presentation. And if you want to take a look here, or you take a look, that we start with this very same information that's on every IEP. And so we have the demographics here. And then when we get down to page 2, that looks the same as well. We have the IEP team members. We talk about procedural safeguards, and that's on every IEP as well. Present levels of academic achievement and functional performance. You'll see that title on all IEPs. And then when we get to the next item, that's when the information becomes new for a transition IEP. And like I said, it starts with the transition assessments. And so if you'll look here, that this is a list of all of the different assessments that were considered for this IEP. Now, on some IEPs, I have seen it quite often where you will see here that no transition assessments, or there were no transition assessments. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they didn't do transition assessment, because you might see where it is then described later on in the summary of assessments. But we do want to encourage, this is a really good, like these snapshot or a way to start. And so we do want to have that list of assessments. So if you're seeing that that's not being provided, that is an important part of this whole transition IEP. So I wanted to give you all a resource on transition assessments and where you could, if you're not seeing good transition assessment being done, or if you even as a parent would like to look ahead and do your own transition assessment. The Iowa Transition website, this is the link for it, and I believe Mari's going to put it in the chat as well. So this website is Transition Iowa, and it has transition planning ideas, assessment and activities, resources, events, just a lot of information around the topic of post-secondary transition. We're going to specifically take a look at the assessment and activity tab. So if you look here at assessments, it will give you some ideas right down in here. So you could look through these and maybe you could pick out an assessment that you would want to do with your child or with your student. So I know that like the Casey's Life Skills is an assessment tool that measures independent living skills. And they also have some information about employment as well. And it can be done on the computer. And so I know of people that have just sat down next to a young adult and gone through that assessment with them. In the foster care system, my case manager, whenever I have a young lady that's going to be transitioning, always gives me this information because she does the Casey's Life Skills with her clients or whatever. And it just provides a wealth of information. So these are just some tools that you could use. These are tools that you could suggest to a teacher that maybe they use. Because again, I'm going to go back to the fact that transition planning needs to start with assessment. So I'm going to go back to this IEP and I'm going to scroll down. There we see the transition assessments. Then we come to this next section and it's titled Post-Secondary Expectations. And so based on transition site assessments, we're going to work on developing post-secondary expectations for the areas of living, learning, and working. And so the first area that we're going to tackle is living. And so if you'll see here, we have summary assessments. That's where it starts. Then we talk about post-secondary expectations, and then we have post-secondary category. So this is just another view of that. And so the first area that we're going to talk about is the summary of assessments related to living. So what information should be included in a living assessment summary? So we want a well-rounded living assessment summary that includes information from the following living areas. But it's not limited to just these areas, but for the well-rounded, we want to talk about specific skills that the student has or doesn't have. So assessing their cooking skills, assessing laundry, housekeeping, transportation, leisure, safety and choice making skills, medication management. So it's important to remember that information from all these areas is not a requirement, but assessment information that only has the student's voice is not considered sufficient. So we want to have the information from the student, but we need to have it backed up by, let's say, for living, a good source would be the parents to make sure that we don't have a kiddo saying that, yeah, I can really cook and I clean my room, and then the parents say, well, have you ever seen his room? And so we want to have that backed up by the parents. So again, we're looking for well-rounded with specific skills in some of these areas. So the next thing that we're going to go to, we're going to take a look at the post-secondary expectation for living. So a post-secondary expectation can be as simple as a one-sentence statement. It is not a recreation of a living summary, like a summary statement. This gets more specific to the student. It projects into the future. Post-secondary expectations must be written as observable and measurable, and it becomes more specific as the student gets older. So then this last thing that we're going to take a look here is post-secondary expectation category. And what this is it is a data collection piece within the IEP system. So what it does is, let's say the post expectation for living was to live independently. Then it's a drop down with different choices, and the teacher would pick live independently. And so what it does is it's going to provide some really extensive data, I guess the hope is, to see if students are meeting their post-secondary expectations for the three areas of living, learning, and working. So the next thing that we'll do here is we're going to go through an example. So Lexi can take care of her basic needs, but requires prompts to complete hygiene tasks and household chores. She can independently do her laundry and is able to cook meals. She also likes baking. Although she does not have her own bank account, she can go to the store with a set amount of money and purchase snacks and beverages without exceeding her budget. Lexi does not have a driver's license and relies on others for transportation. So if you can see there, we have information about how her transportation is, um, how about how she does laundry, cooks meals. She's needing some prompts for hygiene tasks and household chores. Talks a little bit about, the bank account. And so it gives us a nice, well-rounded summary that we can look at and determine, does she have the skills that she needs in order to meet her post-secondary expectation for living. So her post-secondary expectation for living is Lexi will live in a waiver home. And then the post-secondary expectation category is waiver home. So now we're going to go on to the learning category, and I just want to show where that is in this IEP. So there is the summary assessment for living. And here is the summary assessment for learning. It's right under living. So what information should be included in a learning assessment summary? So experience has taught me that this area is often the most straightforward for educators to be able to address, because they have been doing, this is what school has been about, is this academic need until now, where now we have, we consider living and we consider working. So there should be data available to highlight the needs of each goal area. And then some possible data sources include goal progress monitoring, district-wide assessments, some baseline data, formal assessment data. So a key on whether or not there's enough or that this summary is sufficient is that when I'm done reading the learning assessment summary, I should be able to identify the academic goals of the IEP. The next area that the next thing we're going to talk about is the post-secondary expectation. Again, it can be as simple as a one-sentence statement. It projects into the future. It must be written as observable and measurable, and it becomes more specific as the student gets older. And then we talk about that post-secondary category, that drop-down box of that the teacher fills out. That's the next part. So let's talk about an example of that for the area of learning. So Lexi has academic needs in both math and reading. She currently performs at a 7th grade level in math and reading. However, her progress monitoring in reading indicates a decline as she has not improved her scores over the last 5 data points. Lexi is struggling to obtain her English credits. She's been able to recover 1.5 credits of English through Admentum, which is an online program that the school where she goes to has available. And she does this with additional instruction and support from the special education teacher. So her post-secondary expectation for learning is Lexi does not want to further her education formally. Instead, she will participate in ongoing learning opportunities through on-the-job training and or day have. And then the post-secondary expectation category is on-the-job training. So then the last area that we're going to go through is working. And so you will find working on that IEP right under the the learning category. So what information should be included in a working assessment summary? So we want the well-rounded summary that includes, but is not limited to, some of the following areas: task completion, on time, social skills, works well with others, accepting feedback from authorities, and job seeking skills or interviewing skills. Again, information from all the different areas is not a requirement, but assessment information that only includes the student's voice is not considered sufficient. So when a student gets to the working area, you can use, or teachers can use information from like other teachers, other classes or courses that they are in, because a lot of skills that are part or needed for attending class and being part of high school are also possible work skills, such as task completion. Do they get their homework done and turned in on time? Social skills. Do they work well with other people? Accepting feedback from authority. Do they accept feedback or do they become upset? And so you could use a lot of how they are able to kind of manage their high school day when writing up and considering the working assessment. Again, we go to that post-secondary expectation. It's a simple sentence. It projects into the future. They need to be observable and measurable, and they become more specific as the student gets older. And then we come to that post-secondary expectation category. And there's drop down boxes that show or give examples of what could be used. So then we go to an example for working. Lexi has not yet held a job. Currently, she volunteers at Restored Hope Thrift Store. Initially, she performed well in her role, but faced some challenges when asked to slow down. Her job coach has been assisting in her managing these issues. Lexi struggles with maintaining consistency in her attendance and completing assigned tasks, a concern noted by teachers. Her woodworking teacher commented that Lexi excels on some days, but on other days she becomes unfocused, paying more attention to her surroundings and what is happening on her phone rather than the task at hand. When asked what kind of job she would like to have after high school, she cannot identify any that would be of interest. Lexi has never filled out a job application or interviewed for a job. So then the post-secondary expectation for working is Lexi will obtain a part-time job to gain experience with the long-term goal of being full-time employment. So I don't know if you noticed, but Lexi is 17 and is a senior. And so the question is, how did she get to this point and not have a real specific job post-secondary expectation for working? It does happen. And so we go ahead and we write this as a post-secondary expectation, but it gives us information in that we really, with this IEP, need to be providing lots of opportunities for her to be able to identify what she would be interested in and really do a lot of working on what a more specific post-secondary expectation would be for working. So then we have this post-secondary expectation category, and that would be part-time employment. So now that we are through those three areas and we have our summaries, we have created the post-secondary expectations. The next part of the IEP looks like any other IEP. So there are strengths and skills on which to build. We have preference and interest for learning materials and instructional methods and strategies. Special factors affect the disability in the gen ed in general education. We talk about non-academic and extracurricular activities and how that is going to be for Lexi. And we get down here to needs and concerns that are determined by the IEP team. And so these needs and these concerns, as you go back up to those post-secondary expectations and you go back up to those summaries and you have conversations or you talk about what are the needs that Lexi has in light of what the assessments and the post-secondary expectations are in all three of those areas of living, learning, and working. So all IEPs have this section of needs and concerns. It's not unique to the transition IEP. What is unique is that you need to consider all three areas: living, learning, and working. So before we get to addressing the needs, a new area of component, I guess, is course of study that is added now into a transition IEP. So this course of study, we're going to go through it briefly today. In 2 weeks, we're going to be doing, or I'm going to be doing 4333, which is graduation requirements. And so we'll hone in on more components around graduation requirements during that webinar. But we always start with is that there's a discussion around is Lexi going to graduate with a high school diploma or a certificate of completion? Then we talk about the credits that the district requires for graduation. And then we take a look at the credits earned to take towards graduation. How many does she have? And so in Lexi's case, that she has struggled to pass her English classes. She has 1.5 years of English yet to take. So it was decided that she does better taking English classes online through Admentum with additional instruction and support from the special education teacher. So this comment here needs to be here because if you take a look or if you know her the graduation requirements, she needs 4 years of English. And so she's about a half a year behind. But the team sees and feels that she's able to get that accomplished within this year by going through Admentum. When she finishes her English credit, she will have met her graduation requirements and is expected to graduate with her peers. And then we have the targeted date for graduation for Lexi. So the next section here that is added for transition IEP is this courses and activities. So I always like to say that this is the what else? What else does a district have, this specific district have that could help her identify or not identify, help her meet her post-secondary expectations? And so if you'll see here, oh, sorry, let me back up. This is a progressive list. So what is on this list as an 8th grader will continue to be on this list throughout their entire high school career. And so for Lexi, she does not have, for being a senior, does not have a lot that is listed. For other students, you would expect more because this goes way, way back. So if you can see here, there was a referral made back in 2023 for TAP Voc Rehab services. Some for the 24-25, we have some job opportunities, but it's kind of what else can the school district provide that will help with towards the post-secondary expectations. So then another area that's new for a transition IEP is the transfer of rights. And so it needs to be documented of when it will transfer, um, documented of when the family was notified, and then when the learner was notified. All right, so putting it all together, a transition IEP begins with a transition assessment in the three areas of living, learning, and working, and this happens yearly. Post-secondary expectations are established. Every year they can be reviewed, but if you have a student that knows that they're, as an eighth grader, that they're going to weld as a career, that could be that post-secondary expectation through the entire year. Gaps between the student's current skill levels in all three areas and the skills they will need to be successful in their post-secondary expectations are identified, and that can be identified through discussion with that IEP team. And then goals, services, courses, supports, and activities are developed to address the identified gaps. So here's a list of the needs and concerns for Lexi's IEP. So she struggles with her English. She has an academic area need in the area of math and reading. She has a need in employment skills. She does not have a well-defined post-secondary expectation, and she does not know how to fill out an application and has never interviewed for a job. And so how will the IEP address the following needs? And so it talks here that Lexi is struggling to obtain her English credits. And so this is going to be addressed through, sorry for scrolling fast here, specially designed instruction. So it's right here. She's going to take Admentum, but she's not going to do Admentum just by herself, which is an option as well. But she needs some specially designed instruction with the teacher. She's going to be pulled out for English, receive that instruction, and then she'll receive the credit by completing the Admentum class online. And she'll have 120 minutes per week with the special education teacher to do that. So she has needs and concerns in the two academic areas of math and reading. And so how that is going to be addressed on this IEP is that it's going to be addressed through goals and specially designed instruction. So if we go back to here, here is her math goal. Here is her reading goal. And then here is her specially designed instruction for reading and her specially designed instruction for math. So then the next three all talk about employment. So Lexi has a need in the area of employment skills. She does not have a well-defined post-secondary expectation, and she does not know how to fill out a job application and has never interviewed for a job. So how how those are going to be addressed is through a goal with specially designed instruction, through courses and activities, and through services and supports. And I will show you on the IEP. So the first way is this courses and activities, this box that I talk about, that what else does the school district offer? So she's going to have some working opportunities here. And then she has also been given an opportunity to take a career exploration class at the community college. And so that is going to help her. It's about helping her identify post-secondary expectations by doing further assessments and interest surveys and just a whole lot of career development type of activities. So that's one way that this IEP is going to address the employment need. Another way here is through a goal. She's going to have an employability skills goal that is going to address, she's going to work on a rubric that is going to have an instruction and that type of thing on following directions, independent task completion, attitude, productivity. Here is the specially designed instruction around the work readiness, and she'll receive that instruction by a special education teacher. She's also going to receive paraprofessional, and that paraprofessional is will act like a job coach and be with her on these volunteer job opportunities to provide her additional support. She's also then going to be receiving specially designed, or I'm sorry, yeah, sorry, specialized transportation that gets her to and from the school, to and from home, to and from her work opportunities. And then she's going to have work experience. It's around they sorry, they made a determination that she wouldn't take classes to receive some credits, that the majority of students would electives would be part of that. And so she's going to be receiving work experience credit for that. So that talks about all of the different services, supports that Lexi is going to be receiving. So to conclude, transition begins with assessment in the three areas of living, learning, and working. It begins the school year, sorry, I missed a word, when the student turns 14. It's going to be very, very individualized for the students, and it does require many discussions about next steps. What I have found is that the more that a team can have discussions around needs and strengths and all of that, and it's within those discussions is when a plan of what the student really needs kind of starts developing. It really needs to be brought to the team for those discussions, because it'd just be really hard if it's just one person writing and making all those kind of decisions. And that is what I have for today.
Thank you so much, Pam. That was really helpful information. We did have a couple of questions that came in through the chat. So if you don't mind, our first question that came in, and feel free to add any other questions to the chat if anybody has additional questions. So our first question is, how do I handle a situation in which my expectations for my child don't match those that the school has? So if you and the school have different expectations.
So a simple answer, and it's really about the discussion around, if you are able to have kind of that back and forth discussion with the school, I would say that that's where it kind of needs to start. Another something that would be in that assessment type of process as well. You know, if you were to do maybe an assessment on your own that gets at some of the skills. I guess one of the questions that I had is, are you having higher expectations than what the school has? I think that I would need to know maybe some of that information in order to really help or to guide. But a lot of times it is within the discussion between the school and the parents.
I agree. And I think, you know, sometimes that's why it's good to have multiple assessments from different perspectives, because sometimes the student has a different perspective than the parents might have or that the teacher might have. And so making sure you have different perspectives on those assessments can be really helpful. Thank you. The next question is, could you please give an example of a post-secondary expectation getting more specific as the child gets older? So
Sure.
perhaps the same person at two different IEPs, so we can see how that would change over time.
So as an eighth grader, you might get like almost like my senior did it, but you might have something, yeah, I want Jimmy wants to have a job. So that would be as an eighth grader and not very specific. So then you know, they continue to grow. A lot of eighth graders, that's what their answer would be. Okay. So then as a sophomore, maybe you're seeing that Jimmy really, really enjoys welding or something like that. And so Jimmy will work as a welder. And then you put supports and services that would go into that. And then as a senior, I mean, it could even be wants to work as a welder in a manufacturing company, or wants to work as a welder in a tire shop, or where you have that more specific place that he wants to be a welder.
Absolutely, thanks. I was also thinking something like, you know, maybe you have an interest in cars in eighth or ninth grade, but by senior year, hopefully we know maybe we want to be a car salesman or a car mechanic or a detailer or something like that. But to be more specific about that, yeah. Thank you. Another question: when should discussions on 4+ services begin?
Oh, that's a very good question. And I could take the easy way out and say, join me next week, because that's the topic next week. But 4+ services can be talked about really starting in eighth grade, about what that would look like, and a discussion about what 4+ services are, what 4+ services aren't. But the final decision for 4+ services would be that senior year. It really begins to develop and look more specific in that senior year, but it should not be kept to the senior year and not discussed all along. I think that it just needs to be part of the discussion every single year.
Absolutely. Thank you. Any other questions? Feel free to put them in the chat. If you have any specific questions about your child or your child's situation, feel free to reach out to us through our contact tab on the Ask website. It's in the chat there. And I think that's all the questions we have.
Thank you for that, Mari. Yes, I did put a link. If you are having or you're not comfortable putting your questions here, or you have something that is very specific to you, don't hesitate to reach out to ask and work with a family support specialist. Whether you are a parent or a professional, we are here to answer your questions and help you navigate through this. Pam, if you could go forward like 2 slides really quick. As Pam already mentioned, next week she will be back and we will be discussing 4+ services. So that was a great segue into it. So please join us back next week for that webinar. Pam will be back and do another wonderful job talking about those components. If you could go to the next slide for me, Pam. We thank you all for being here today. Just a reminder, this is our contact information for Ask. While we do have a home office in Johnston, Iowa, there's not somebody always there. So please utilize our website to fill out that contact us form to get your questions answered or to receive help, or you can call one of these phone numbers and leave a voicemail and it'll get you added to our system as well, or you can email us at info@askresource.org. Please make sure you follow us on Facebook for any updates around the state. And if you want to come back and rewatch this webinar or see any of our previous webinars, please find them on our YouTube page. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Hope you have a great rest of your week.